Welcome back, everyone. Here we are, 2024. It was just a year ago since I was blown away by all of your reference loudspeakers, including your electronics, okay? And one of the things I've said, David, about TAD in general, technical audio devices, is how balanced the presentation is. It's a very natural sounding speaker. They sound so big, David, in this room that is massive. You guys are looking at the room right now. This room is huge, okay? I think it's the size of my house.
It's 52 by 28.
52 by 28.
That's a big room, and it's got at least 12-foot ceilings. These soffits are not helping anything, but we tamp them down with some acoustics to make sure that it could sound as good as it can. So.
Well, have you guys ever seen this show on TV called How Do They Do It? I'm a fan of that show. I'm sure you've seen it. Oh, yeah. Well, this is exactly what we are about to find out. How does TAD do it? How do you guys do it? How is it possible that this CR1TX can sound so full, by the way, so powerful? There is, just to give you some attributes, big, wide, deep, very balanced, enough bass to fill this room, which is massive. He just explained to you how big it is. And it's not shy. It doesn't feel like it wants to not be front and center. How does TAD do it? How can they possibly do that with this stand mount loudspeaker?
There's a few things about the speaker I think that are unusual. One is the structure of the cabinet and the mass that it has for such a, it's relatively small compared to some of the sound that comes out of it. And oftentimes here during the last couple days, and I think you said it yourself, like, are we listening to the big speaker or the small speaker? And people had to clarify more than once because the sound stage is as wide as the room and as tall as the room. I mean, it's not just a horizontal sound stage, but there's a vertical sound stage. And I think that even though the speaker is at a normal kind of height, there's two parts that I think really are at play. One is that the CST driver, it's a dual concentric driver, point source, and they're beryllium diaphragms on both, but they use a vapor transfer process, which is sputtering at 6,000 degrees, and believe me, I'm sure that's in a laboratory setting. Don't try this at home. But instead of being a metal dome, which can be sometimes perceived as harder sounding.
Oh yeah, yeah.
These are sputtered onto a material that's very light and very durable. And because of the beryllium also is the lightest and stiffest metal, it can reach incredible immediate response, the transients, the frequency response, and do it very naturally. And then because in a CST driver, you're somewhat horn loading using the cone of the mid-range from the tweeters as the tweeters at the center. So it provides a little bit of directivity control. So instead of with a flat-based positioning of a tweeter firing in 180 degrees, a dual concentric CST driver has a little bit more control. And then it goes, so I think that's contributing to that sound stage that we know, that we hear.
It's phenomenal.
And then because that mid-range driver can also go down quite low, the crossover point allows the low frequency driver to really focus on the lows. It does have a high X-Max. They use an aramid type material, which is a woven similar to Kevlar, but a little different, onto their, creating this very lightweight, very stiff cone. And then the cabinet itself has zero resonance. So all of the energy, so there's a mass piece that's wrapped around the back that just doesn't allow the cabinet to have any of the resonance. And then I think the porting and the unique porting scheme of that speaker is that it uses the bottom opening like many, but it kind of combines it with the stand, and it's just very elegantly placed, so you don't even absolutely see where the port comes from until you really look carefully. But the timing of that port system and the driver that they've developed, and everything inside a TAD loudspeaker is made actually by TAD. It's not, there's no off-the-shelf components. They're not digging into some parts bins from all kinds of other things. They specifically make everything to fit that particular unit, learning from each product that they make. But when you're looking at a driver, they're not, hey, let's see if we can make this driver work. No, let's make the cabinet and the driver and pair those things. And that's unusual for a lot of companies to have that access point. But they're very focused at high quality design. And since, they've made drivers from about 1975 is when they started. And they were focused originally at the professional market. So they were making drivers that were in the wall of sounds and the concert level. And some of those systems I've been researching just like where some of this came from. And it was really to make the very best components. And then, of course, Pioneer was using that as a kind of research lab for the Elite series of speakers. And then they decided to let TAD just go with their own internal design and create the great hi-fi products that we see here today. And so there's a focus on fundamental development of technology, and they look very far down the road in terms of all the products they make and figure out like how does this fit into our story, and,
Got it.
And family. So this is a family, the reference family. We have the big reference one, which has an incredible sound and has that same sound stage where it's like, wow, and just, because of the support of two bigger drivers, it can fill even more
Larger rooms. But one of the things that I will say that my audience needs to understand is the fact that I sat here yesterday, you guys are watching it right now, listening to both loudspeakers. And first we heard the R1s, the big boys, and then we switched over to the CR1s, right? The stand mounts. So, of course, naturally, there is a stigma against stand mount loudspeakers. People always think that they're never going to measure up to the floor standards, right? I think everyone can agree on that. We all have that feeling, right? We always feel
get
that.
A floor standard seems more substantial.
But I feel like ever since I met the CR1s, that train of thought was completely erased, like out of my head, completely gone, because I started to understand what was possible. Now, when we switched to the CR1s, I couldn't believe how we still retain the impact, the speed, the clarity, and how they're still capable of filling out this massive room, right? And so for me, not only is everything you just said about the technical specifications and what makes this speaker so special, but for me, it also shows me the level of engineering that's going into these speakers, the quality of the parts, the cabinet construction.
Everything about it.
But there is one thing that I think my viewers, I know, will ask me. Setup. How hard are they to set up?
For a room like this, we had been here last year, and we knew this room was difficult because of things like these soffits, the 3 soffits in the room all ring a little bit, and so we brought acoustics to fill those in. And then if you look around the room, these beautiful graphics, they're actually acoustic panels that are printed.
Oh.
So all of these these are broadband absorbers, so they're just meant to take the whole room down a notch in terms of the decay time and absorb some of the errant high frequency. It's a little bit more tilted to the high frequency than the low. In a room of this size, we don't really need to take a lot of bass out. We do have some bass corners in here that are designed specifically around the frequencies that build up in corners. And sometimes in a listening room, we want to use that energy. We want to have a little bit of that extra oomph in the bottom end. But if we have too much of it, then it starts sounding like this, and we start losing clarity in the vocal range. And there's certain frequencies that are considered masking frequencies. So when I listen to a room, the first thing I want to understand is what is the balance of this room. And we have some basic tools for understanding that. One being I have an advanced measuring system, and then I also have things in my iPhone because sometimes you can't have all your tools. So
Yeah.
I have some tools that I use to understand what's going on. Mostly these tools from 35 years of tuning recording.
Nothing better than that. Yeah.
So the first thing was that we spent a lot of time before we spiked up the systems finding out where the imaging really made the most sense and trying to, like last year I set up one system and then you made me drag it out of the corner. Fortunately, you almost could lift those on your own, but that's a substantial
Almost,
speaker.
Yeah.
It took
How much
two
does
of
it
us.
weigh?
I think the CR1, I know the ref ones are 400 pounds, and I think the CRs are 100 and 35 pounds.
It's heavy.
But the stand is also 100 pounds. So, you know, when you have to, once it's all bolted together and you got to move that, it's almost, I think 275. I think all
Wow.
240, something like that. It's up. It's substantial, and I think that you can't underpin the fact that when you have a heavy made, a cabinet that's very dense. And we have people who are trying to make the most density out of the cabinet. The benefit of a combination cabinet that's MDF and wood is that it resonates a little bit in the right way. But this cabinet has no resonance, so any resonation is going on inside the chamber and is adding to tonality, but it's coming out of the front of the speaker. And I think that's why the low end is so impressive. And that was the first thing, that's actually the first speaker that actually made me love TAD, because they sent me those when we first started off. Hey, this is the TAD sound, what do you think? And after spending, first after I broke them in, about 2 weeks of continuous play, I then went in and really made my evaluation. And I started with, I'm going to be in here a couple hours. Honey, I'll be a little late in the listening room.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, I'll see you tomorrow because I know you. And she was right. I didn't get home till 5 in the morning because it sucked me in, and it was one more CD, one more, and I was using the SACD as well as streaming to just see what this was all about. And it has such incredible, in some ways, I think also when you have a single driver per band, so right now we have one low frequency driver, the mid and the high being in the CST, but you have essentially the least amount of phase interaction. When you have double drivers, you have a lot more things to consider in both the way the porting is, the way the two drivers load up. With one driver and a really great one and great porting, we're able to get a complete bass signature, and that's also partly because that the mid driver doesn't have to work too hard in the low end. It's not really contributing in the very bass part of the speaker. And that driver can act like the full bass, but also it feels to me like there's a subwoofer when I'm listening to it.
Yes, agreed.
In the sense of the tone,
Agreed.
The notes that it's hitting.
Right.
But a lot of us, when you add a subwoofer to your room, the challenge of trying to get that to time out is almost impossible, to be honest, because you can have the best subwoofer that has all the adjustments and tuning and all that, but it's not affecting where the bottom of your last driver is in the system. And if your speaker was designed to go to 35 hertz, but you want to add more bass energy to the room, well, the best way to do that would be to roll off the bottom half of your speaker and have the subwoofer take that over and have it be just an extension of your main system. And I'm looking at that for other things that we do in the market, because I think a lot of people want the feeling of a subwoofer, but they don't want the complication of it.
Agreed.
And they don't want the space out.
And
we're lucky to sometimes get enough space to put a speaker of that
Yeah.
size in our house or in our living space with our partners. My wife doesn't allow me to have a giant system in our living room. So, but I have 3 listening rooms a mile away at my office. So I'm very fortunate to have the best of both worlds. I can have a really great listening environment without any restrictions. But in my home, I have to keep it really tight, and a lot of us have the space that we've been allocated. And I think when you have a speaker on a stand mount, there's 3 benefits to it. One is it's easier to move it around and find that optimum place. So
is it hard in general, the stand mount, to set up in a space? Do you find it tricky? Do you feel a room has to have certain requirements? I'll give you an example. Some rooms, my room is one of those. It's heavily treated, and so it can make some speakers completely disappear from the room, meaning it swallows all the energy. It doesn't pressurize the room unless you have a big speaker like the big R1s, right? That's kind of what's going on in my room. I would not be opposed to having one of the stand mounts CR1s, but there is something that makes me nervous, which is, are they going to be completely annihilated by my room acoustics? Well, that's kind of like what I think my audience would like to know. How dependent are they on room treatments? I know they are important. We know this.
It's important, but I think it's not essential. Okay.
Okay.
And obviously, when you have a highly treated room and it's taking energy out, one of the things you have to look at is where to place the speakers.
Yes.
Because in many environments, you can place the speakers in a good way to take advantage of all those things. So that's where I think setup and placement, like micro movements, might surprise you. But I spent a lot of my day on Thursday before the show,
Right.
listening and just making slight adjustments to the angle. And I got it to a point, and I was like, something's just not 100% lining up, where I felt like the bass was timing with the way the room was timing. And I moved them over I had originally had them just a little further apart, and I moved them over enough so that they were a foot closer together, or they were, actually, I should say it was a little closer together, and I had to move them up. Once I moved them apart, like to almost where the R1s were, it was suddenly the bass hit. And so, sometimes we look at a room and we think, like, this is where they should go. And you start listening and you go, okay, this may not be delivering what I want. And when I first set up the room, I had the speakers 1 foot closer to because I was like, hey, this is a 52-foot room. I don't need to add, and I don't need to take advantage of every space. I want the speaker to breathe naturally. And I had them out almost where we're standing, actually. I started 2 feet out, and I started playing music and moving them. And one of the things I think is very powerful is using both measuring tools. Mm-hmm. So I play a little pink noise, and I look on my measurement, and I can see what happens, and I can see where notes are lining up. And now some of that I could hear it just as well, too, but sometimes we can't see where phase is affecting. You can hear something and perceive it, but you don't know where that is exactly. And so measurement tools can get us to visualize the problem. And once we understand maybe what that distance is, so the distance from the front wall, all these things,
right.
Because there's a back wave when you have a freestanding speaker. Now, if we could make the room disappear, the way to do that would be to put the speaker inside the wall, and we would get rid of all boundary interference. And that's all the timing between what happens out of the sound of the back and the sound that's generated in the room, getting all the way down there, hitting this ceiling, hitting the floor, and all of what's coming out of the speaker directly. I think where TAD has an advantage is in directivity. So they're not a highly directive, it's not like it's in a big horn, but it's like a soft horn in the sense. The cone, the shape of the face, the way the driver's loaded up and the porting scheme is meant to put the energy more to the listener. I think the way you can use the speaker to your advantage is find that placement, right? Find that. And so, yes, if you have the time to move your speaker around, find that location. You might find that there's what I like to call the drive point of a room, which is when I put this speaker in this place, I get the most direct signal to my listening chair, to where I'm going to be sitting, or my couch, and as little of the room response as I can possibly manage by positioning it, by angling it. And if you notice, we have a very slight angle on the speakers. Sometimes I come in a room and I put the speakers flat, and I'll just start listening to that, and then kind of start moving them around and see where does the image come together. And there's a distance issue here. In general, when you're looking at a speaker, you want to be in an equilateral triangle where, however you place your room, you want your head to be inside that equilateral triangle, not your sometimes I walk into people's rooms and they have their listening system pointed at their face, and these are omnidirectional, so we like to surround them with sound. So that's how you can use your room, right, to get those responses.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so the distance between where you're sitting, the next wall closest to you. And so in a big room like this, we have one big advantage, which is we can keep those reflections out of the listening environment until they're way back there. So at our home, that gets more challenging. The room becomes much more involved in our listening position, right? So anyway, those are just little key things that I look at. I think when you sit down with that speaker, though, it always feels like there's more speaker there.
You guys continue to impress me. I was impressed last year for the first time because it is the first time that I actually spend seat time with the line. I have never done that before. I always saw you guys at shows, and I'm here revisiting the same room, the same man, same setup, and I am just simply taken aback by what I hear. If you ever have a chance to listen to TAD loudspeakers, whether it be their reference series or their more affordable line, okay, which you can find here, you can come to the Florida International Audio Expo. Expona, you guys are there?
Yeah, we have 2 rooms at
Two rooms at Expona. And are those the only 2 shows you do nationally?
No, our plan for this year so far is to be here at the Flag Show, Expona, the show out in Costa Mesa, and Capital Audio Fest. Those are the 4 anchors that we have now. We're considering some individual dealer events where we can bring the reference experience, to around the country. We have a listening room up in our headquarters in Massachusetts, where we invite anybody to come if you want to come up and come see how we do, how we listen. And we have a pretty nice sounding room.
Okay.
And we also have, New England seafood, so come on up. But I'd love you to come and join us as well, because we have a very interesting, multifaceted business that serves a lot of different parts of the music industry, as well as this hi-fi world that we love so much.
All right.
Great to see you guys, and thanks, Jay, for making the time to stop by and take a listen. And you made me pull that system out late night the other.
I did.
And we sat here for a couple hours, and
it was killer. And that's why I'm here again and showing my audience, what has definitely impressed me once again. Folks, that's all I have. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Continue to support me. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.